My name is Belinda Howland. I am 22 years old. Today is January 3rd, 2021. I'm here with
Julia Howland, and I'm 20 years old, and we are going to be interviewing today
their grandmother, Mary Lou Orito del Torrio. I'm 534 years old.
And we are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Our first question is, when were you born?
Oh, that's a hard one. I was born in 1936.
On what day?
April 12th, 1936. I was born on Easter Sunday.
Who were your parents?
My father was Joseph Orito. My mother was Lois Grace Harry Orito.
What were they like? Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, my mother was 16 years old when I was born. I didn't know her very well because I didn't live with her very much. I lived with my grandmother most of the time. My father was a school dropout. He was in school at the time of the Depression, and almost nobody finished high school of humble beginnings. And my mother died when she was 24 years old, so I knew my father much better, and loved him very much.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up?
Yes, I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., in a part of town you would really not want to find yourself. But when my mother died, I was 8 years old, and before that, I was in a home when I was 5, and my grandmother took me out of the home, so I was not living with my mother when she died. I was living with my grandmother, and then we moved to a part of town. My grandmother owned a rooming house that faced the back of the Supreme Court. And we moved there when I was 8 years old. And I used to roam all over Washington, D.C. by myself on buses and trolleys, and it was very interesting.
What was your childhood like?
My childhood was troubled. My mother didn't like me very much. She was a child having a child, and I understand that now that I'm 534 years old. She put me in a home when I was 5, and then I was living with my grandmother. I didn't have many friends my own age, so I never really learned how to ride a bike or skate or do any of those things. But I did. The positive thing was that my mother was a big reader, and I got all of her books. And so when I was 8 years old, I was reading Vanity Fair and The Count of Monte Cristo, and I get lost in books. There's nothing wrong with that.
How would you describe yourself as a child?
Myself as a child, I turned into rather much of a people pleaser. I was pretty much sucking up to people so I could stay there. But it turned out to be a positive thing, because when I learned by being a people pleaser that everybody has a story, and I got interested in listening to them, and I really actually started listening to what they had to say, and it was a good lesson.
Whenever you were younger, what did you think your life would be like when you were older?
I had absolutely no idea what my life would be like, but I will tell you that when you get on a trolley when you're 8 years old and you go downtown Washington, D.C., and you go into the theaters, you enjoy. I just lived day by day. And when we were in the rooming house, We were right up the street from the Library of Congress, and I'd go there. You couldn't take books out, but you could read them while you were there. And Folger's Shakespearean Library was right across the street from that, and I would go there. They had a miniature Globe Theater. I had no idea what I was looking at, but I was listening to Shakespeare. I'd get on the trolley. I'd stop at the Art Museum in downtown D.C., and I'd go in there. I'd go to the gift shop, and I'd look at the postcards to see what I was supposed to go look at. And then I'd go look, and I developed a very big interest in French Impressionist paintings. I thought they were beautiful. So I have no complaints.
Do you have any favorite childhood stories?
Well, I pretty much just told you most of them. I did enjoy going to movie theaters in downtown Washington. It was a time where movie theaters in downtown were like movie palaces. They looked like Versailles. And I would go in there, and one of the theaters was the Capitol Theater, and they had stage shows in between the movies. And I'd go there starting at 10 o'clock in the morning and stay there all day. And I watched Basil Rathbone quoting Shakespeare on stage. It was wonderful. So I like those things.
So now we're moving away from childhood questions, and we're going to go into like early adulthood.
Well, first of all, may I tell you,
Yes.
I do remember, one of the things I do remember and would set my time zone is that Washington, D.C. was all black because and as far as lighting was concerned, it was all dark because it was World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And I live right behind the Supreme Court, and the Capitol faces that. And then when I was living in that rooming house when the war ended, and when they turned the lights on again, I had never seen such beauty in my life, because all of a sudden the Capitol was lighted up, the Library of Congress was lighted up. My two uncles, my mother's two brothers, were both in the military, and they were on VE Day, which was the victory of Europe, and VJ Day, the victory over Japan. There were parades and excitement, and then all the lights came on again. So it was a very intriguing time.
So what did you do for a living whenever you first started your adulthood?
My very first job, when I was 15, I sold men's socks at Woolworths 5 and 10. And I'd have to take a bus, 2 buses, to get there to work, and it was very interesting. That was sort of the beginning. I didn't have another job until after I finished school.
And then what did you do?
Well, I really wanted to go to college, but in Washington, D.C., there were no state schools, and we didn't have any money. So my father told me that I was going to nursing school. I graduated second in my class because that damn Julie Walker beat me out. But anyway, there was a nursing school affiliated with D.C. General Hospital. It was a 1,500 bed hospital. And you could go there, and if you qualified, they'd pay you. And they would deduct tuition from what they paid you, and I got $6.25 every 2 weeks. So I found myself at age 17 learning the nursing world, and that was it.
So now it's going to be questions about like family and all that stuff. So what is your ethnic background?
Well, my ethnic background is basically Italian, although my mother and my grandmother, their people were from Wales and England, but the Italian heritage is so strong that that's basically, I think of myself as Italian. My grandfather and grandmother were born in Sicily.
And have you ever visited any of those places?
Yes, my sister and I, several years ago, went to Sicily, and we went to the villages that our grandmother and grandfather came from. They were 30 miles apart. And I was much more touched than I had. I knew I wanted to do it, but it was very, very touching, and it was something I'll never forget.
Any traditions passed through the family?
Actually, no traditions.
I would like to note that we're laughing because I messed up speaking.
That is Julia, not Belinda. who
My
messed up.
apologies.
The traditions were family was everything, and we found ourselves getting together every Sunday for dinner, and it was a good one.
Tell us about your siblings and Grandma Josephine.
Oh, well, I was an only child in my father's first marriage. As I mentioned, my mother died when I was 8 years old, and she was 24. My father remarried when I was 10 years old, and he married, he was 32. My stepmother Josephine was 19 when they got married, but she was grown up to me. And their wedding took place in the living room of my grandmother's rooming house. And then I went to live with my stepmother, Josephine, and my dad. I was the only child. My stepmother, Josephine, was probably the best human being I've ever known in my whole life, and the greatest gift that God ever gave me, because she just was a wonderful person, and changed my life totally around. She taught me what loving was all about. My father didn't hit me anymore. That was the Italian way, and he grew up in a different time and a different place. So she was just, I cannot think of one unkind word to say about her. She proceeded to have 7 children, and she had two girls and 5 boys. And my 21-year-old brother was in Vietnam. He was awarded the Silver Star posthumously. He was killed in action, but he was very brave. 7 months before that, my 15-year-old brother was killed in a target shooting accident. So, but now, and he was very nice. My siblings and I now I have 2 brothers younger than my children, but we are very close, and I love them to death, and they were a great gift also.
Who is Art Bonneau?
Art Bonneau, when I started playing bridge with my friend, I used to play bridge all the time in party bridge in ladies groups, doctor's wife groups, I called them. And one time we were playing bridge, and one of my partners and I decided that we wanted to get better and move to a higher level. So we went to a high school evening class in bridge. Then we presented ourselves to the duplicate bridge world. And we were just beginners, and but we were good at it, and we really enjoyed it. And then at one of the games, Art was a bridge player also, and he came to the game. He had just retired. And so as it turned out, not too long after that, my partner, Carol Proctor, who I really enjoyed, her husband retired, and they moved to the state of Washington, and I needed a partner, and Art needed a partner, so we became bridge partners. And I met his family. He met my family. He came to my girls' weddings with his wife. He and his wife had 13 children. He said he was very influenced by the movie Cheaper by the Dozen. And so we became very good friends, and we played bridge constantly together. And then as the years went by, he was assigned to consulting in New Mexico. And so we sort of lost touch. And then when he returned, we both had different partners. And unfortunately, at one point, his wife died. And at that time, my marriage had ended. And we wound up being bridge partners again. And then it became a romantic thing. And I learned one thing: it's really nice to be friends first with someone that you wind up loving very much. And we shared 15 wonderful years together. We were on all 7 continents together. Neither he or I, growing up, ever thought we'd get anywhere. And we taught each other things, and it was wonderful.
Do you have any favorite memories with art or stories?
Well, the only time Art and Mary Lou ever argued was at the bridge table. And as I said, we taught each other things. And one of the greatest things I found about living long enough is learning things. And when you learn it, when you know better, you do better. And we just did that for each other. Our first trip together was to the Amazon rainforest, the Galapagos Islands, and Machu Picchu. And it was one of those, we shook our head when we landed in the Amazon rainforest, and our guide said, first thing we're going to do is go tarantula hunting. So we thought, okay. But it was the beginning of a wonderful, wonderful time together.
How did you get into travel?
I got into travel when I was married. Neither my husband or I had ever been anywhere, and we were both of Italian heritage. And so I got married. My husband had graduated from medical school on Wednesday, and we got married on Saturday. And we were not used to having any kind of money at all. And then during a residency, you're not making that much money either. But for the residency was 3 years, and all of a sudden we found ourselves with some money. And so we decided we'd really like to see the world, and we went on a trip called The Capitals of Europe. And it was Paris, London, Rome, and Geneva. And we didn't know very much about the details of traveling, so we had joined a group, and the group was large. It was 45 people. And but we were entranced by the places that we found ourselves in. And when people started complaining, we thought, don't you know you're in Paris? And it was the beginning of our traveling in Western Europe. When my marriage ended, I had no idea. I wanted to go off the beaten path, but I was playing bridge one evening, and this a man was visiting his daughter. He was living in Florida, and this was in Pittsburgh, and he had just come back from a trip to Turkey, and he was telling me about it, and it sounded very interesting. I was alone at this point. And then he came back. He was only there 2 weeks, came back the next week, and he had a brochure from the travel company, Overseas Adventure Travel. And I looked at it, and I saw this trip to Nepal, which I never dreamed of visiting. And I thought, well, I didn't like people who complained, and I didn't think anybody would be going to Nepal for their very first trip, so they'd be seasoned travelers. So I decided, I signed up for it, had no idea what I was getting involved with. And I absolutely fell in love with it because I learned that there are so many ways to live a life. I learned that this overseas adventure travel company arranged for you to go into people's homes and to actually meet people, to go into their schools and churches, and and the groups were very small, there were 12 in our group, and I was hooked. I never stopped after that.
So you've always said that you can't pick a favorite place that you've ever been to. So what is the most interesting place you think you've ever been to?
Well, if pushed, I would say the country of Bhutan, which is a country I never even heard of until I went there, and it was a country of 400,000 people near Nepal and India, and Buddhist people. The first time I went there was one road that went north and south. They did not have television. It was their monarchy. They had a king, and their motto was gross national happiness. They still wore their national dress, and I fell in love with that. And as a matter of fact, 10 years later or so, I went back as a gift to myself for an anniversary visit. And I would have to say that.
Do you have a most visited place that you've been to?
You mean where I've been the most?
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Italy about 14 times because that's my heritage. It was my husband's heritage. And so when we were doing Western Europe, that's what we did. By this time, we had learned that we did not have to go in a group, and we traveled with one other couple, and we would rent a car and take trains, and we would do our homework by looking in travel books. It was before the computer world was so big. And then later, computers did make a difference. But Italy, what we discovered about Italy was that all over the place was beautiful to go. Not just, my husband's people were from Italy also, but his were from the Abruzzi area, and we went and visited that. And we never quite got to Sicily, but I did later, as I said before, with my sister. And we found many beautiful different places to go in Italy, so that's where we wound up going the most.
Can you tell us about how you stayed in touch with people you've met overseas?
Well, now, when I first started, I do like photography very much, and I never thought about somehow getting my pictures back to I like to do faces, and at some point I realized that they would like to see the portraits of themselves that I did, and at first I sent them back. I was making friends with this overseas adventure travelers, and if I knew they were going, I would send photographs back with them. But then with the internet and with social media, that's why I remain on Facebook, because a lot of my guides and people that I've met there are on Facebook, and we are in contact anytime we want to be. But then I would send the photographs back, and then the guides would take pictures of them looking at my photographs, and it was mutually beneficial. So we stay in touch now mostly by social media.
So now we're moving away from travel, and now we're talking into more family stuff. So why do we call you Gaga?
We call me Gaga because of Miss Belinda. At some point, in fact, I have a picture of this at the time, and I don't even remember where we were, because I didn't know what to have you guys call me. I was thinking of Nana or something. And you started calling me Gaga, and it stuck. And I thought it sounded a little bit like a mental condition, but but then I grew to love it, and that's who I am. I am Gaga. I'm Gaga to you and Julia. And I'm Grandma Mary Lou to the other three. So, and I like all of it.
This is only a question. This is not by Julia. Why do you call me Sunshine?
Well, what happened is I gave all five of my granddaughters, I gave a label. And you were my sunshine, and Bridget was my rainbow, and somebody was my shooting star and moonbeam. But you two, you and Bridget, yours were the only one that stuck.
Sorry, Julia. It's all good. What is something about being a grandma that you didn't expect to happen? Like you could only know from becoming a grandma?
First of all, I decided very early on, going through a period of time when I thought I was the homecoming queen, that I did not want to have children. I mean, because after all, they would, Well, that choice was taken out of my hands because I counted wrong doing the rhythm method thing. And I never expected to get pregnant. And when they laid Kathy across my chest, I had never known any feeling of love like that in my life. Well, you can multiply that by 5 times when the grandchildren came along, because there's absolutely, first of all, I'm not required to change I didn't have to do anything with them. All I had to do was enjoy them. Mm-hmm. And I'm just filled with love and joy every time I'm with them.
Do you have any favorite being a grandma memories?
Well, I love being able to travel with my girls. One trip we went to Paris and London, and we took the Channel to underneath the English Channel and between. For somebody who growing up never thought they'd get anywhere, and here I am with my granddaughters, and I thought that was wonderful. And then another trip to Amsterdam and Belgium, and I loved all of that. But it doesn't require anything special. I just like to be in their company.
Has anyone had a big influence on your life?
Well, I have to go back to my stepmother, Josephine. I really didn't. She really taught me that I was worth loving.
What do you feel most grateful for in your life?
I have so much gratitude for living long enough to learn things. When you learn better, you do better. And I just have so much gratitude for that. You have absolutely no idea. I started out thinking I was worthless, and I realized that I'm not. And I started out trying to suck up to people to get them to like me, and I discovered I really like people. And everybody's got a story, and I love hearing them. I love contact with them. As my darling daughters once said to me, Mother, the elevator man at Saks knows the date of your last menstrual period. I do tend to talk to anybody. I love to, and sometimes, but I'm careful. I was on an airplane one time going overseas, and I sat on the end seat of 3 seats, and it was a young couple sitting in the other 2 seats. And so I didn't want to bother them, so I put earphones in to listen to an audio book. And the young man leans over to me and he says, "Well, that's not very friendly." And I said, "Okay." I took out the earplugs, and we chatted for the 8.5 hours it took us to get to London.
Nice. What do you believe are some really important life lessons?
Well, I learned that what you think of yourself is what people see. And you have to understand that you're valuable, that you are of value, and then they will know that too. And so how you feel about yourself is how other people are going to feel about you too.
How has your life been different than what you've imagined?
If you think I ever expected to be in Tibet at a 19,000-foot mountain pass, or if you think I ever thought I would be in a black zodiac in Antarctica, you're absolutely insane. So it means that as you grow and as your life, you just don't know. And there are wonders out there, and they can be yours.
Okay, for our final question, how would you want to be remembered?
How would I want to be remembered?
That's a big question.
That is an enormous question. I guess I'd want to be remembered with a smile. And I would want to be remembered as someone who loved being with other people and who treasures all the gifts that she was given.
So those are all the questions that we have. Is there anything else that anybody wants to say?
Are we being recorded now?
Yes, we are being recorded.
Okay. I'd like to say thank you, God, for all the gifts I've been given, and for even the bad times. The lessons that you learn are amazing, and I hope for the same for my children and my grandchildren. And don't let anything knock you down. Just get up.
Julia, is there anything you'd like to say?
I would like to say that I'm grateful to be spending time with my grandmother during this time, because for future reference, we are in about 9 months into the coronavirus pandemic. We are still here. And thanks for listening.
Bye.
Oh, you get to say something.
I don't know. I thought we gave this as a Christmas gift to Gaga, Julia and I, for us to sit down, come up with questions and ask her, even though, spoiler alert, we've heard some of the stories before. But they're good to be on record so we can listen to it. And I had a really fun time doing this.
Me too.
All right.
Me too.